You know, in my day, I've seen a lot of discourse around Ben 10. If it's not the art style, or the writing, or just the fact that we have to contemplate living in a world where there's currently no Ben 10 series announced in the near future. But what I never really see discourse on, in terms of Ben 10, is the soundtrack and the composition. Now, this is something that I've always thought was severely overlooked in the series. Nobody really talks about the music of these shows, because people pay more attention to how something looks and how something is written compared to how something is scored for the most part. So today I kind of just wanted to spew my thoughts out on the different compositions for each show, what I like about them, what makes them all different and unique to their respective series, and which one do I like the most.
Ben 10, I've come to kill you and conquer your world. Is now a bad time?
The classic series is actually one of the only Ben 10 series that made an effort to create a main character theme for Ben himself. If you've watched the show, you'll be very familiar with this theme that plays, particularly when Ben does anything sort of heroic or in any general uplifting moments of the show. There's also variations of this theme so that when they do reuse it eventually, it doesn't really feel stale or like overused like, you know, your average TV show. But while this main theme is mostly an orchestral composition, the entire show mainly utilizes synths to create its soundtrack. One of the variations of Ben's theme is also created using an instrument which sound is very commonly known for being a sort of alien motif in older sci-fi movies from around 1950s to 1980s. I did do some research, and apparently this instrument is called a theremin. This show's soundtrack mixes elements of classic orchestral instruments, synth instruments, and rock instruments to compose the entire soundtrack of the series. This is also one of the only Ben 10 series that actually went out of its way to give certain aliens their own character themes and motifs. Specifically, Heat Blast and Grey Matter are the ones that are actually given their own motifs a decent amount of the time whenever they appear.
Gray matter? I said muscle, not minuscule. Oh man, for once I was better off as me. Aw man!
Overall, the music for the original series is very unique to the show. This series in particular probably has my second favorite soundtrack. Alien Force opts more to have a typical sounding heroic soundtrack. This score is mainly composed with orchestral instruments and is more in line with something you'd hear from your average comic book movie flick. One of the few unique themes throughout this and Ultimate Alien is the transformation theme. Which for the show has become iconic in its own right. But other than that, the show very clearly doesn't have as many unique themes to certain aliens or characters as the original series did, which does fall more in line with, you know, your classic TV series that opts to reuse tracks and compose them specifically to be reused at different moments. But while I do prefer how the original series decided to score its show, I do think the soundtrack here is much more fitting to the tone of Alien Force. Overall, I think the soundtrack here works for the show and the tone that Alien Force and to some extent Ultimate Alien was going for, but I still do prefer the variety in the original series. I prefer the variety in the instruments they chose to use, how those instruments were mixed together, and some of the unique themes that they had for that original series. Now moving on to Omniverse, which has some of my favorite music in the entire franchise. I really enjoyed the way they chose to compose this series. It does everything that I said I enjoyed about the original series, but then takes it to just a new level entirely. There are so many scores and compositions in this show that stands out and are so impactful to the scenes that they're used in. All the emotional scores are very well composed. The music for the action really adds to those scenes, makes them feel exciting. Even the background music for when characters are just talking and interacting and doing very mundane things really adds a nice flavor to the show. and the theme that typically wraps up every episode gives the show a really nice vibe in a way that I can't really describe, but I just know that I like.
Worse than being transformed into a 16-year-old Ben Tennyson! Oh, man.
This was also the only show since the original series that actually brought back the idea of alien themes, although it is mainly and only for feedback specifically.
How are you supposed to catch a turbocharged getaway car with a living extension cord, doofus?
Doesn't matter how, as long as I look good doing it.
But with that being said, I think A, feedback theme is really good, and B, feedback is a very essential alien to the plot in seasons 1 and 2. So with that being said, I think it is justifiable that out of all the aliens they chose to give a main theme, they gave to feedback, since he was supposed to be special to Ben. Although the one thing I will say that I thought they could have capitalized more on is bringing back that original theme from the classic series and really solidifying it as Ben's main theme. I really would have liked to hear what I would have sounded like in the Omniverse composition, but you know, with music there's stuff like rights and stuff, and clearly all these shows were composed by a different group of people, so I see why they couldn't maybe bring back certain themes, but still, you know, it would have been nice. I didn't talk about the reboot because I haven't watched enough or heard enough of it to actually comment on the particular choices made in the soundtrack. This video was more generally made to focus on the 4 series that are actually set in the main timeline, because I've always noticed the differences in the way they were composed, and I've always had a lot of thoughts that I just kind of wanted to get out there. You know, it really is a shame that none of these soundtracks were ever officially released, because man, does some of this music deserve to be listened to in its purest form.